Alright, so real quick before we jump into the main attraction of this video, I want to thank everybody for the amazing support of the video I uploaded earlier this week. It was not only my first video after no longer being a VTuber, but also I put a lot more work into that video, so I was heavily stressing that the video was not going to get the attention that ended up coming of it. And by no means was I expecting the amazing support that video actually ended up getting, but like, I'm blown away. As of recording this video, it is currently at 15K views, which is my all-time best video on this channel. So with all that being said, thank you all again for the amazing support on the video earlier this week, and hopefully we can continue to see that kind of support going forward. But without further ado, let's jump into the actual video. Let's talk some more Yu-Gi-Oh, shall we? That's right. This week, there are going to be 2 videos. Now, I cannot by any means promise that this is going to be a normal standard. I, of course, will still strive for the 1 video a week, but thanks to the amazing support that came of the video earlier this week, I decided, let's try and keep some people's attention, shall we? And what better way to keep everybody's attention than talking about the most topical subject in Yu-Gi-Oh! As of late, how to fix this damn game. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Has officially reached its 25-year anniversary. We've been living it for like the last year and a half, weirdly enough. Math doesn't quite compute there, but I digress. And with that, we've had a lot of rule changes. There are a fucking metric fuck ton of cards in this game, close to I think like 20,000 cards now. And just overall, the game has kind of become a bit of a mess. One of the most common comments that I actually saw in the video earlier this week is people talking about the fact that cheating is kind of like an inevitable thing, or just misplaying or making errors is an inevitable thing because there's just so many minute rules to Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's so many cards to keep track of. And that's a very fair argument. With the fact that we have at least 5 different summoning mechanics and there's about 20,000 different cards and every card has a college thesis written on the bottom of it, things are bound to get confusing. And it's because of all these very tiny, intricate rules and all of these different summoning mechanics that it's really hard for Yu-Gi-Oh! To get newer players. Now, like I said a minute ago, this has been a topic that's been constantly going throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the past few years. This last year specifically has been a major topic. But it is by no coincidence that thanks to the release of Master Duel 2 years ago, there are a lot more eyes on this game. Thanks to the release of the free-to-play simulator that Konami graced upon our existence 2 years ago, we did get a lot more eyes on this game, ranging from returning players or even newer players. However, as we learned about a year ago, the conversion from Master Duel players to paper play has been a very bumpy road. And there, of course, are a lot of reasons for this. The biggest and most notable one is obviously the giant paywall of actually getting your very first deck up and running. Now, the ugly truth here is the fact that you really just can't go out and buy 3 structure decks and just be able to immediately go to your locals and start topping. I will, however, admit that the Fire King structure deck and even like the Trap Trick structure deck, just overall, they've been getting a lot better, but at the end of the day, we are in a borderline tier 0 format, so even if you went and bought the Fire King structure decks, you're just not going to be able to perform at your locals. And a lot of this is simply just because 90% of the staples you're going to need to run your structure decks are not in the structure decks. Some of the best reprints, of course, being Infinite Impermanence in the Cyberdark structure deck, Evenly Matched in the Trap Trick structure deck, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring in the Crystal Beast structure deck, and Drone Lockbird in the Fire King structure deck. The Rarity Collection did, in fact, make it easier for newer players or returning players to get into the game a lot more easily, making it more cost-affordable to get some of the more prominent staples in the game, like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Forbidden Droplet, and even Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion. However, picking up staples is only half the battle. At the end of the day, you still have to decide what deck you're going to play and get the main core of that deck, which, depending on what you want to play, could be very expensive. So realistically, the paywall to actually pick up a deck of cards and actually be able to competitively play would probably be about a minimum of $100 if you're not picking up some of the most prominent staples in the current format, like SP Little Knight. But you know, at the end of the day, if you're playing full Wanderese, you can just kind of pull out a 20 from your wallet and boom, you have a full-fledged deck. Now, unfortunately, there really is no way to fix this whole paywall problem. Of course, you know, cards have to make money, card shops have to make money, third-party sellers are going to try and make money. There's really just no way to fix this. Everyone's going to complain that cards need to be cheaper, and, you know, it would be nice, but at the end of the day, people like their cards to be worth something. They like the fact that they spent their hard-earned money on these packs just to be able to pull something that actually made it worth their money. So, you know, it's just unrealistic to expect the fact the third-party market is going to be any cheaper than it already is. So looping back on course, we return to the question of how would I fix this game? And like I mentioned earlier, this game has 20,000+ cards in the card pool, most of which are completely legal, with the exception of the Forbidden and Limited list. Having so many cards legal all at the same time creates this problem where power creep not only becomes a huge problem, but also cards that were printed 20+ years ago have randomly become relevant, and because they were printed 20+ years ago, the odds of them having a reprint if their name isn't Dark Magician or Blue Eyes is incredibly unlikely. Thus, returning to the third-party market where that one printed card is like $40+ because you have to go buy it from fucking Invasion of Chaos. And I know MBT has kind of been beating a dead horse with this concept, but I truly agree with the fact that set rotation should really be a thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or at the very least should be a format in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For those who don't quite understand, you can of course go to MBT's channel for all of the details. He does do an entire series based on this, but the gist of it is cards from the past like 5 or 6 sets are completely legal, and every time a new set comes out, the oldest set in the chain officially becomes illegal. And of course, every so often they print staple sets, so that way they are still legal and accessible. These staple sets, of course, would be kind of like Rarity Collection, where they just reprint staples like Ash Blossom and Joy's Spring. The only major issue that I have come to find with the set rotation idea is legacy support, or just archetypes that get support for a long period of time. The biggest example that comes to mind immediately is the branded archetype, where it was getting support for easily a year and a half before it finally stopped getting support. And even so, they've already confirmed that eventually they will be doing more support for that archetype. And this, of course, would pose a problem for set rotation when, for example, the set that Fallen of Alabaz got printed in all of a sudden is no longer legal. But then the argument could be made that any card in that archetype could just get reprinted in the staple set, so that way they are still accessible for their deck. Another possible counterargument to the set rotation idea is that people would have to be shilling out constantly and updating to new decks, but at the same time, like, that's what people already fucking do. Because the unfortunate truth is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks in the meta are constantly changing faster than I'm losing my hair, and that's saying a lot. Another good idea, and easily my favorite idea for fixing Yu-Gi-Oh! Is stop using the fucking ban list to sell product. That's right, if y'all don't know, Konami makes the Forbidden Limited list to sell product, if it wasn't so obvious already. Now, yes, there is a small aspect to the Forbidden Limited list that does, of course, balance out the game, because they still want you to play the game and not be mad at them. But it is, of course, there to sell the next product or get you to buy future product that is later planned ahead. If you want cold, concrete evidence of the fact that they do this, they released the TCG ban list that butchered tier limit format the weekend Photon Hypernova released. No, that's not a coincidence. They wanted you to buy Kashtira. But like I said, they of course do still use it to somewhat balance the game, because things do get out of hand and they do want you to still buy product and still play their game. Obviously, if they're not somewhat balancing the game, then people will of course leave it. But for the most part, it is used to sell product. But the biggest example of them actually using it to balance things was Super Heavy Samurai getting neutered the weekend it was viable as a strategy. Now, I do, of course, understand Konami needs to make money, stores need to make money, so they need to kind of push forward and create that drive to buy the newer product. They don't want people playing tier limits for 5 years straight and not touching Kashtira because tier limit was just the better strategy. But at the same time, maliciously banning certain cards or just putting them on the ban list so that way people will buy the next new flashy strategy is also just very obvious and money hungry. Now, unfortunately, I don't really think this is going to be a thing. Konami, like I said, uses the ban list to, for the most part, sell future product. It's not something where I can just snap my fingers and, they'll stop doing it. But I do think that this is a really good idea if the Forbidden Limited list was more used to balance the game, more rather than sell product. Now, the argument could, of course, be made that, oh, well, they listen to us sometimes. They just put some of the floodgates to 1. Again, because they want you to keep playing the game. They want you to still buy their product. And yes, it is still a very much good move when they do stuff like that. When they actually do listen to the community, it's a good thing. But at the same time, as a corporation, they are doing that so you continue to buy their product and continue playing. Another way I would fix Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Konami trying to minimize on very specific and complicated rulings that are just going to create fights and eventually cards getting banned or just removed from play entirely. Minimize that as much as possible. The biggest example here, of course, is the card Victory Dragon. The card itself really wasn't all that great, but it did start a controversy on whether or not your opponent could scoop before you declare battle, and people were trying to create rulings that if Victory Dragon was summoned, your opponent was not allowed to scoop, and of course, that was never a Konami official rule, but it started a lot of controversy, and I think cards like this should stop being printed where they create just controversy on how the ruling should be stated, and, just causing big arguments. I also think Konami needs to stop printing cards that just are custom, essentially. Like, as a branded player, I can tell you that if you read Branded Lost entirely, it just reads like a completely custom card, and that a Fusion fan of Konami was just like, I'm tired of them interacting with my Fusion-based deck. No. Another big example of this is I think Konami just needs to stop printing cards that blank effects and completely change them. The biggest example being the Fusion Grapha, but also Samsara D Lotus is the most recent example of this. I don't have a problem with you negating my effect, but the moment you change it for your own benefit, I don't think is really a good thing. I also think Konami needs to stop printing cards that directly says your opponent's not allowed to play the game. This can range anywhere from floodgates to locks, or just overall just saying they can't do things, which, of course, if you want me to make a video on discussing floodgates and locks, by all means, leave a comment down below and like the video. But I think we can all kind of agree that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at its best when both players are allowed to play the game and interact with each other. And I, of course, want to preface that negating effects and omni-negates is far different than a card that directly says your opponent's not allowed to do anything. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is fun when both players get to play. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not fun when I get to play and watch you just struggle. Don't get me wrong, I like to win, but, I like to win and feel like I won, not feel like I just dominated, and I don't know, some people got their kinks. But that's really all I got for you guys today. I know, obviously, none of this is going to happen. This is just how I would fix the game. I think Konami needs to stop printing certain cards or certain interactions with cards. They need to better use the Forbidden and Limited list to actually balance out the game properly and make it more interactive for both parties. And just overall, I think set rotation's a really good idea, but it needs to be implemented in a very healthy and, good way. But I'm curious on what you all think. Comment down below how you think you would fix the game with some of your ideas, of course. And also, don't forget to leave a like and also subscribe if you're not already. We had a lot of new faces come to the channel on the last video. And of course, I would like to keep that ball rolling. So if you're not already, leave a subscribe and of course, hit the bell for notifications. But with that, I will see you all in next week's video. See ya.